Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Here with my co-host. I spent 6 hours with him last night. We're recording this. So I've lost track of what day it is. Tuesday? It's Tuesday night. Coming at you on a Wednesday. It wasn't enough. I need more time with Jeremy Cohen. That's how crazy. We'll get into it. It wasn't a crazy night, but it was a lot at once but spaced out. And now we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So first I'll ask you, as always, how are you doing, Jeremy?
Great. Just hopped up on energy still. It's the only thing keeping me awake, really. I feel like I've just been staring at screens for so long. I do it for work too, but just in general, it's a lot to have it go through your minds. And I'm sure for people as well as they're processing it too, there's a lot going on, but it's fun. It's, I love this time of year. It's great.
I love it too. I love it too. And you know why? Because it's funny. I would argue that the two of us probably spend as much time thinking about this stuff as probably about any person that doesn't work for the Knicks. And yet, even though what happened was not, I don't think it was completely unreasonable. I actually think if we went back in time and were like, and you told us this happened, and be like, yeah, that's probably the most likely thing. I don't know if any of us had this result in our head. Did we?
I didn't. I thought the Knicks would commit to, one contract and then try to keep max space open. No. And they didn't do that. Then they decided all these other guys will pay everyone and we'll enter next season over the cap. It was a little surprising for me, but again, there were two paths and they picked the one of the other ones. So I was fine with it and still am.
So we're going to talk. So this show is going to be basically two halves. We're going to talk a little bit more about, 24 hours later. Well, yeah, about 24 hours later. What are our thoughts after we actually update what happened today on Tuesday? So just again, timestamp. It's 9:02 as I am speaking these words. If something happens after this and we didn't talk about it, sorry. We're going to give one more retrospective, and then we're going to kind of look maybe around the league a little bit, some things maybe we wish the Knicks did, some things maybe we're happy the Knicks didn't do, some other teams of interest, things to be thankful for that have to do with $87 million. 87? Yeah, I think it's 87. We'll get to all that in a bit. First, let's update the stuff that did not happen last night. So I guess we're going to start with Taj. So the Knicks added another player. It's a player we know very well by now. It'll be his third season with the Knicks, second of which is on a vet minimum, and that's Taj Gibson. So welcome back, Taj. Round of applause for Taj Gibson. We love Taj Gibson here at Knicks Film School. I don't have much to say about that. Do you have anything, Jeremy?
I'm happy to see Taj back.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of role he's going to play, because I would imagine he maybe could have played a prominent role elsewhere. I don't think he'll be back to what he was doing last year when Mitch was injured, but I'm sure they basically feel like you're really important to the culture. Yes. You are an injury away from getting significant minutes, and he probably thought, great, I can live with that. It's fine by me. Let's ride. I
hope that this is leading to a role with the organization long term. I'm not saying that's why they did this, but I just, for what it's worth, because I think someone reported that he had bigger offers elsewhere he could have gone. Someone may have even guaranteed him a role. I don't think he feels like he's going to be guaranteed a role here. And just, for anybody who's like, well, if you brought Taj back, why did you need to sign Noel to that contract? We'll get to that in a second. I think what's great about Taj is he's always ready to step in and play 30 minutes if you need him. But at the same time, he is 36 years old, and I don't know that it's ever wise to rely on an older player to play like a key role for him. So I think he's back in the perfect capacity. Like you said, he could step up if needed. If not, it's no big deal. The other big thing, I guess two big. So let's stick with what the Knicks actually did. The contracts that were signed. It was reported last night that Evan Fournier's deal was 3 guaranteed years with a 4th-year team option. It was initially reported that Burke's deal was 3 years fully guaranteed. And the reporting on the other two players, Noel and Rose, were uncertain as to the guarantees. Ian Begley reported today, first of all, SNY retracted their report that the Burks contract was fully guaranteed for 3 years. They obviously apologized for the error. They're awesome, so no harm, no foul. But it seems as if either all or most of the final years on each of those contracts, the 30 years for Rose, Noel, and Burks, are not guaranteed. I think a lot of people think this is very significant. I wasn't really making a huge deal out of the 3rd years. That said, in the case of Rose in particular, just because of the health thing, I do kind of think it's meaningful. So again, I'll turn to you. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it is very significant. I mean, it's basically the Knicks have more control than we thought they were going to in terms of an out clause with that. And I think that was the other thing. Like, the reason I reacted so strongly to, in particular Noel, was just based on the fact that we were operating on the assumption that the 3rd year was guaranteed. And then later on, we found out, that's not the case. And so now you're looking at it, it's like 2 years and $20 million. That is much more palatable. If you need to have that 3rd year, you can assess. If not, that's fine. You can cut them loose. So I think it changes the dynamic completely, especially if we're talking about any of these pieces as trade pieces. You know, like if the Knicks turned around and made a deal at the deadline, then a team basically that's acquiring these players is saying, oh, well, I take on these players for 2.5 years. No, you just take them on for 1.5. And it could be that nothing happens this season. And then it's in the summer. Yeah. And it's, we could basically have an expiring contract. We could even potentially flip those players for more. Love it. Let's do that. So I think it really does matter quite a bit.
And it's really, I literally just thought of this now, and we just saw it in Miami. Miami had the chance to open up a ton of cap room to stay as an over the cap team. The Knicks, presuming they don't trade these players in the next 2 years, which I think we both think that they may, but just for argument's sake, let's say we get to the summer of 2023, they're going to essentially have the opportunity to either open up something close to a max slot, or kind of remain maybe over the cap, which talk about flexibility. And again, a lot could happen in the next 2 years that affect their salary cap. But the benefit of team options, as you're alluding to, Jeremy, is not just in and of the option itself. It is what it allows you to do as far as maneuvering with your cap. So good job by them. I guess the last thing, should we talk about the point guards that were signed today? I know we said we'd save the other league stuff, but we should at least say, so off the board that weren't off the board last night. Let me know if I've missed anybody. Kendrick Nunn, I think I'm going to go in reverse order here. So Kendrick Nunn, off the board. Who else is off the board? I'm like
Spencer Dinwiddie is off the board.
Spencer Dinwiddie. I feel like Spencer Dinwiddie was kind of off the board already, but he's now officially off the board.
Patty Mills, Ish Smith, some of the names.
Yeah, Patty Mills. I think it was Nunn the only. Maybe that's why I was drawing a blank, because I think Nunn is the only really big one, right? That people were waiting around to see, like, could he be the starter? Because the other two that are still out there, Reggie Jackson and Dennis Schroeder, I feel like those are the other two. I'm trying to think who else got signed today. I guess really it was just Kendrick Nunn. And Patty Mills, like you said. Okay, so that's not clearly you wanted Patty Mills on the Knicks.
My phone wanted it, I guess, but yeah.
I guess so. Okay, so this is the lay of the land. How are you feeling today about everything in retrospect with a day to sleep on it?
Good. Listen, I feel good about it. I kind of woke up and my thought process was, we don't have to worry about the Knicks, putting a lot of eggs in their one basket for next year, because that was really my biggest worry. Yep. You have 3 great players, or at least very good players in Steph Curry, Bradley Beal, and Zach LaVine.
Yep.
And my biggest concern was, if the Knicks keep all this cap space open and all of them either re-sign or sign somewhere else, what is your backup move? What are you going to do?
And can we say, Curry extended today. We should probably mention that. Curry extended today. And Zach LaVine didn't sign anything today. But the Bulls did something that man, it sure seems like it's setting up him signing for the max with that team a summer from now, because they have DeMar DeRozan now. Anyway, let's continue.
Right.
Sorry.
So if you don't have those players, then who's next? It's like Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart, and that kind of whole tier of guys. It's worse than what we're seeing this year. So the front office basically assessed and said, if we don't feel confident in us landing one of those three players, then what we're going to do instead is spend now. And it's kind of like what Brock Aller did, not specifically him, but as part of a collective unit in Cleveland, where the Cavs would extend a lot of players and get them on longer term deals, because they figure, hey, instead of us dealing with the whole free agency thing and maybe we can't trade you during the draft and all that, let's just get you locked under contract. And it's like, the only deadline, or the only time the Knicks can't trade these players is until December 15th. So in their minds, it's basically like, after that, we can do anything. We could do it at the deadline. We can do it at the draft. We can do it free agency. We can do the next one. It keeps going on and on. So the Knicks paid the price for a year's worth of team control ahead of time. Because again, like, let's say that happens next year and the Knicks are kicking the can down the road and they have $40 million in cap space. And let's say Damian Lillard becomes available. The Blazers aren't going to trade Lillard into cap space. They're going to want trade filler. They're going to want picks, and they're going to want young players. And that's really important. And that's what the Knicks are providing.
Yeah, the notion that the Knicks were going to keep open a few things. The notion that, and maybe we should have made this clearer last night, the notion that the Knicks were going to keep what does Lillard make for in 22? He makes something close to $40 million, right?
He'll make $42 million, not this season, but the one after.
Yeah. So the note, and he's going to make close to 40 this year. Then and this is again maybe slight disagreement between the two of us. The notion that they were going to keep open that much money in contracts that were going to expire after this year, to me, was always a little bit silly. And if you look, so I just a very, very quick list of players. I took away, or I didn't count players that signed 1-year deals with contenders, or really cheap 2-year deals with contenders, because those are not a representative sample size of the types of players that you could get on 1-year deals, because we know players don't sign for as much as they can to go to a contender. So the players that I have that signed on 1-year deals for non-contenders: Cody Zeller, Gorgie Jang, Robin Lopez, Trey Lyles, Torrey Craig, Alex Len, Sterling Brown. Maybe there's one that I missed somewhere along the line, and there's a few others that'll probably may sign. Ish Smith, I think it was a 1-year deal.
2 years. He got a team option.
Oh, he got a 2 year. Okay, there you go. The point is, like, the Knicks were not going to kick continuity completely to the side just to have one less year of guaranteed money on players that, there's high probability are not going to replicate what, the kind of the special brew that they had last year. So that's significant. I think if you want to have a gripe with the offseason, it is in the value that the Knicks placed on continuity. If you want to sit here and tell me that you would rather have Lonzo Ball for $20 million a year than pick two of the three non-Fournier players that the Knicks signed, and say, I'd rather have Lonzo Ball than that. Again, Jeremy, you don't like Lonzo Ball, right?
No, I do. I just don't like him for the role that I think a lot of people figured he would be, which is a lead guard. And guess what? Yeah. That's not what he's going to be in Chicago.
Or the second guard, for that matter, after the other guy they brought in today, which we'll get to later. There's a very distinct chance that could have gone poorly here in New York. And it would be a situation where midway through the first year of that contract, all of a sudden the league looks around and be like, that's 3 more years at 60. So there's a downside risk. There's upside risk there. 100% there's an upside benefit there. There's also a downside risk. This is a little bit of like, the devil, but again, if you want to say that the Knicks played a little too safe, maybe they could have let one of the three guys go. But again, who do you want to let go? And the obvious answer is probably Noel. But they kicked the can down the road. This is what they did. They kicked the can down the road, and they did it in a way that they felt comfortable with, and they upgraded at the one spot that they needed to absolutely upgrade with, or upgrade on, which is a wing that could actually do some stuff.
I don't see them as kicking the can down the road for this.
What do you see it as?
Well, kicking the can down the road to me would have been just 1 year deal. Like, hey, let's try to get back to our main goal, which is getting a star, and we'll worry about that. This is a commitment. This is,
that's fair.
We're committing for the next 2, maybe 3 years, especially for Fournier, 3, maybe 4, of having these guys on the payroll. Like, to me, kicking the can would be, let's get out of this deal as soon as we can. And the Knicks didn't do that.
Well, they couldn't get out. I think the point is that they can kicking the can down the road as far as we did not get Kyle Lowry, who was the quote unquote best player that we could have gotten this summer, right? So we are now going to wait until the next opportunity, such that and we hope that the player that they eventually target is better than 35-year-old Kyle Lowry. But like, we're going to keep the as you said, keep the powder dry, right? And what they did with these contracts is going to make it easier for them to complete that deal. And I just have to say this really quick, and it's going to be in my newsletter, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. The notion that like the contracts that they signed, even if they were 3-year deals, is going to make it appreciably more difficult for them to complete a Damian Lillard trade. Yes, I'm referencing John Hollinger's column in The Athletic this morning, is nonsense. Absolute nonsense, because if you think that Portland's going to be like, okay, let's see. They checked off the boxes for the young players that we want. They checked off the boxes for the draft picks they want. But, oh, wait a minute. No, we needed Nerlens Noel on only 1 more year and $8 million. 2 more years at 20. Deal break. Like, no, I'm sorry. That's quite frankly, it's ridiculous. They didn't make their lives any harder. When these star trades happen, the salary filler is completely secondary. The only thing you can't have is the salary filler is like Kevin Love and 2 years and however many $1 million. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, of course. And other people have mentioned this, so I'm certainly not the first. But if you look at what the Miami Heat accomplished 4 years ago or so, look at the contracts they had. Hassan Whiteside, Tyler Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, James Johnson.
Yes.
They got all of these awful deals off of the books.
Yes.
And they turned out just fine. They made a finals appearance. Granted, it was in a bubble, but they did it. They were the ones who were able to lure Kyle Lowry. They got Jimmy Butler. They were able to make things happen. So like, there are exit strategies to these deals. And the fact that there's going to be a team option on the 3rd year for everyone except Fournier, and then that's on the 4th year, I think that's crucial. But I see kicking the can down the road as what last year was, which was, okay, that's we don't really know what we are. Yeah. We'll keep cap space open. We'll sign guys to 1 year deals. Then we'll reassess. And they're in a long-term engagement right now.
The only other thing I want to say, and then we probably move on to the rest of the league, because I feel like we just talked about this so much last night, and I don't have a ton more or different to say. It's funny how quickly we forget. This organization has been dog shit for the better part of 20 years. It sucked. It has sucked to be a Knicks fan. I mean, we make the best of it, and we love our Knicks, and we'll always love our Knicks. But there's been some rough times. We just had a really great year, and here's the thing though, you just referenced the Heat team in which they had this magical run, right? That's where I think they signed all those contracts after they went 31-10 after starting 10-31, right? Mm-hmm. Is when he re-signed all those. Okay. Those contracts, go back and look at the James Johnson deal, the Kelly Olynyk deal, and that was at a lower cap. What the Knicks did here with bringing these players back, that's not what Pat Riley did however many years ago that was, 3, 4, 5 years ago. There's a lot more flexibility here. And the reason I say that is because to say, oh, you had a nice year, we got to bring everybody back. No, you don't necessarily. There's a price point at which you don't do that. But to go the other direction and say, well, the Knicks had this great year, but it was fool's gold. Let's just toss away all of the stuff that made it what it was. That's just as silly. There was clearly something here that worked, and it had to do with the players that was here. It's not all, Worldwide West and Leon Rose. So I, for one, am happy to get to root for, relatively the same core. Again, I think that's a cool thing. And I do kind of think that they may be able to continue playing well, especially with the growth of the young players and the addition of Fournier. So that's the only other thing I wanted to say there.
Yeah. Again, I think at the end of the day, Leon Rose was left with a difficult decision. And look, Knicks fans have a diverse set of opinions, so no one was ever really going to be happy.
It's very kind of
that's just the truth of it. So Leon Rose picked a direction. He's leaning into it. I like that direction. It is fine. It is good. No one is, commending Leon Rose for spending money. It's the sort of thing where he made this team better, and he's still working on it because of the fact that the Knicks still have a little bit cap space left over. So that's
good transition.
Consider.
So should we talk about who we want them to spend the cap space on?
Sure.
Actually, one thing, because I actually got caught in this earlier today. If you account for the fact that they are not going to waive Vildoza, and you account for both of the prominent rookies, Grimes and McBride, taking spots on the team, I think they are at 15 players, correct?
14.
There are 14 players. Okay, so we have to go through this now. This is quality podcasting, folks. So Randall, Barrett, Knox, Toppin, Vildoza, Quickly, Mitchell Robinson. That was 7 right there, right? Mm-hmm. They brought back Burks, Rose, Noel, Taj. Okay, that's 11. They added Fournier. That's 12. McBride, Grimes, 14. Mm-hmm. Am I forgetting anybody? I'm not forgetting anybody, right?
Nope, that's 14.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go. I was wrong. You were right. I hate when I have to say that. So they do have one extra roster spot. Potentially 2 if they waive Vildoza for a little bit more money. Do you have one person in your mind that you want them to add?
No. That's the beauty of it. I don't. There are some candidates, right? So the 2 most obvious ones that are available in free agents are Reggie Jackson and Dennis Schroeder. Of course, the thing with Kendrick Nunn passing the Knicks up for more money or for less money in LA, I think, and I don't have anything to back this up, but just a thought, Kendrick Nunn received a player option on the second year. And if we're looking at what the Knicks have done with these contracts, they haven't given anyone a player option. It's been, team options, non-guaranteed. These are our terms. We'll pay you well, but that we want some more control here. And I'm guessing that probably was a reason for why he did not want to be in New York. He wanted that out clause for himself. He
also gets to go to the clear favorite in the West, because for as much as we might shit on the Lakers, and we'll talk about a little bit about the Lakers later, given the injury situation with Jamal Murray, given the fact that Kawhi Leonard may not play basketball next year, I mean, if you're going to make someone the favorite, make it the Lakers. I have something to throw at you. Do you think the fact that, because for Kendrick Nunn to have turned down an offer from the Knicks, and maybe he didn't turn down, maybe you're right, maybe they just wouldn't acquiesce to his terms, but clearly they were going after Nunn before he signed with LA. Do you think that means that they are not nearly as high on Dennis Schroeder as we were led to believe, which at this point I think is kind of obvious? Or do you just think that Dennis Schroeder is holding out hope that, I don't know, the cap space fairy is going to fly down from the sky and grant some team, $20 million to give him? I feel like it may be a little column A, a little bit column B, but I was thinking about that earlier today. Yeah,
I agree. And I think another thing with Schroeder as well is, maybe the Lakers do some sort of situation where they bring him back for a year, and then
it makes sense.
And then it's like, well, look, we were going to use this money for a traded player exception. We'll just bring you back for a higher salary. We can then match you and Nunn, and then we can get Buddy Hield. Like that sort of thing where, so I don't know exactly what their mindset is. I don't know as well if something that's complicating is the fact that this would need to be a sign and trade, most likely. There would need to be moving parts, So we talked about there are 14 roster spots. If you're bringing Schroeder in, great, you're at 15. But if you want to make the math work, you have to send someone out. And there's also the room exception that the Knicks still have once they reach their limit with cap space. So that's also, then you would be at 16 if you shipped one guy in, one guy out, and everything. So now you have to worry about 2 out. So, there's a lot going on. This is also where the Vildoza thing kind of comes in handy. So, the Knicks could trade Knox and Vildoza somewhere else, maybe to a team like the Thunder. They've got a bunch of TPEs. They could absorb those salaries. The Lakers then get a traded player exception. The Knicks get Schroeder. Or they could do the same thing with the Clippers and Reggie Jackson. But then, the thought process is, okay, you're getting the room exception. You get someone, you're at 15. You then re-sign Theo Pinson to a two-way. You sign Jericho Sims to a two-way. You're set. That's great. Another option, of course, is that the Knicks could do exactly that, but take Luka Vildoza out of that trade. They could just send Knox out, and then they could cut Luka Vildoza. And as a result, the Knicks would be at 13 roster spots. They'd get in Schroeder or Jackson. Then they're at 14, and then they don't have any money. Luka Vildoza was just cut. He's signed for the room exception. Maybe the Knicks give him the team option on the second year or a non-guarantee. They say, hey, thanks for working with us. We're going to give you a little bit more money. We're also going to give you 1 fewer year of team control. We really appreciate you working with us. Let's do it. And then the Knicks have salary at their disposal to include in a trade or keep him or just, cut him loose at the end of the year. So there's some mechanics going on. I know there's also the idea of Colin Sexton. I think his market is kind of dormant at this point because the Cavs would basically just be bidding with the Knicks. A lot of teams are set. So my guess is that the Cavs are probably going to say, well, we didn't like the offers before. Let's just take a gamble. Maybe this thing works with him. If not, we can always flip him at the deadline. And then the other thought process is with Jalen Brunson, where Mark Berman reported, and it's been reported elsewhere. I think Ian Begley as well with SNY
mentioned Jalen Brunson.
He mentioned not just Jalen Brunson, but the idea of a sign and trade
with Reggie Bullock. I wanted to get to this. So the Knicks, according to Ian, were the ones potentially pushing for that, correct?
Yes.
And the theory would be, well, I guess 1, potentially they would be getting a player back, but 2, wouldn't they be getting a traded player exception?
Depends. I mean, it would have probably been if it were with cap space, and then you can't have a TPE with cap space. But the bottom line here is this. The Mavericks have a traded player exception because they just sent Josh Richardson into Boston without really taking any money back. So they can absorb a salary in a trade using that. The Knicks are basically saying, hey, let's send Reggie Bullock into that traded player exception. But the Mavs could say, no, we're not really interested in that. We'd rather just sign Reggie Bullock to the mid-level exception. And then during the season, because we have a full calendar year, we'll just, use the TPE on someone else. Maybe someone who is available during the trade deadline, something like that. So the Knicks are trying to get something out of Dallas, but Dallas doesn't need to give up anything. So, maybe the Knicks try to do, maybe they do try to get Brunson, but it seems like the idea of getting Schroeder or Jackson, as long as a third team can play along, might be a little bit more feasible in this case.
I think it's a matter of dollars and cents. I mean, I have to think if Schroeder, the fact that all of the smoke that the Knicks were interested in Schroeder couldn't have been nothing. Like there has to be some legitimate interest there. He does fit the profile kind of a Tibbs point guard. You'd probably be playing him less minutes than Derrick Rose. Like I think he's just dead set on he wants a certain amount of money, if I had to guess, but I don't know. And then as far as Reggie Jackson, the Jackson thing is fascinating because he knows what he could get from the Clippers. I would imagine the Clippers have offered, because for anybody who doesn't know, the Clippers can only offer him up to, what is it, $11 million, 10 and change, something like that.
In that ballpark.
Yeah, in that ballpark. They can't go more than that just because of cap mechanics and the contract that he was signed to. So what's he waiting for? Because there's no, like, where's the other team out there there's no other team that makes sense and would pay him more money. So that one's confusing to me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, but
I'm also confused. My guess is it has something to do with Kawhi, but Kawhi can't go anywhere either because there's nowhere that has the money. I mean, unless he's going, unless Oklahoma City, they finagle something, but it's not going to happen. And I don't mean Kawhi going to OKC. I'm just saying as a third team and a vehicle and whatever, but I just don't see it happening. So it's odd to me why Kawhi says, hey, I'm going to meet with these teams. It's done. The market's pretty much wrapped. It's like,
what?
It's like Kawhi and John Collins and Schroeder. and then Jackson as a result. Yeah. Right. And now the Spurs are out. So, and allegedly the Hawks offered $125 million to John Collins, who didn't take it. I don't know why, but now his market is gone too. Are the Hawks going to basically say, well, this is our offer. You can either take the qualifying offer and deal with it or not, that I'm curious about. But that's the thing with Reggie Jackson. I don't understand why, unless he's just waiting for Kawhi to sign, but Kawhi can't really go anywhere else. So
it doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Yeah.
If they go into the season with this is their roster and they don't add anybody else, I don't think I'm going to be heartbroken. I think I'll be okay with it. The notion that as you've spoken about, that the importance of entering next summer as an over the cap team, they would have to sign a buyout guy. So either trade for someone that takes them over the cap, or they would have to sign a buyout guy.
They can't. That's the thing, because they have to sign Derrick Rose eventually. And once they sign Derrick Rose, then the money commits. So for sequence of order, or the order of sequence for how this is going to go down, the Knicks are going to sign Fournier and Burks and Noel, right?
Using cap space.
Using cap space. That's the first thing they're going to do. Then after that, they can keep Rose's cap hold and sign anyone else using cap space. Here is that amount of that's left over.
And that's that happens, what is it, $8 million you've been hearing about?
Around that ballpark. Once that happens, then the Knicks go over the salary cap to re-sign Derrick Rose. They can sign someone to the room exception. They can sign Taj Gibson to his minimum contract, and it works perfectly. But it's like this one window where if the Knicks do not capitalize on it, it's gone. And they really need to, because if they keep adding salary, it's just a waste of money. So that's the thing. It's like, I look at this in two directions. Number one is the financial component of it. The second one is also just at the point guard spot. I think the team, it's pretty clear that they don't view Derrick Rose as a consistent starter. He
doesn't want to be a starter.
Right. And I think they're worried about the wear and tear. And as I said last night,
as they should be,
he hasn't played that many games in general. He doesn't eclipse 60 games a year. And if you're paying $13 million, which granted, I think is a very fair contract. I think it's worth it, especially when you look at the other Sixth Man of the Year award contenders. But
he was their best player in the playoffs last year. He's worth $14 million. If the last year isn't guaranteed, he's really worth $14 million.
Right. And then you've got three guys. You've got Vildoza, who, I mean, listen, the Olympics are its own thing. It's an isolated thing, but
we'll see what happens.
But we'll see what happens there, indeed. But I just don't think they see him as a starter. And then you've got Emmanuel Quickley, who, again, I think they're not going to thrust him into a starting position and basically like figure it out will be great. I think they're going to want someone who's a little bit more steady behind the wheel in terms of proven experience.
At least, and they're not starting a rookie.
Right. They're not starting Deuce McBride. So you're looking at someone who, whether you agree with it or not, the Knicks want someone better than what they have right now to start at the point. If they didn't, they would have figured out other ways to do something. They wouldn't have gone after Kendrick Nunn, but clearly they want to address that position. I do that, and then you've got a deeper team. You can use that salary. You can use other salary and make trades that you want. Bada bing, bada boom.
Well, a good way to end it. The last thing I'll say for anybody listening is like, well, Oladipo is still out there. Kelly Oubre Jr. is still out there. There is such a thing, and I think this happened with the Marcus Morris. Now, we're happy Marcus Morris got signed because he turned into Emmanuel Quickley. But I think there is a valid argument for that team that, like, not that they would have been, it's going to sound stupid. They would not have been better without Marcus Morris. Marcus Morris was their best player for that half a season that he was here. But, like, it bumped everything else down a notch. Like, and it just, the starting lineup ended up getting clunky and the whole thing. I don't think that's a risk of happening here. But putting the point guard position aside, I like the way everything is set up. That's the point that I want to make. I like the fact that you got, Fournier, RJ, they're my wings. Okay, my backup wings, I got Quickley, I got Alec Burks. You got your Randall and your Obi. Like, that's all in good order. The only spots that I could see them at this point, obviously point guard, would it shock you if they figured out a way to use the cap space on a center? And I'm not saying sign someone because there's no centers available that are worth signing that money. Although Enes Kanter still is out there. What would make you guys more? I know what my answer is. Make you more angry? They bring back Kanter or they sign Elfrid Payton?
Elfrid Payton.
Andrew?
100%.
This isn't close. Elfrid Payton.
Yeah.
Oh, see, for me,
Kanter stood up for Frank in fun moment, and the Knicks eventually benched him. You know what they didn't do with Elfrid Payton?
Until the playoffs?
Until it's too late.
If I had to listen to Kanter give sound bites ever again, I would take
1,000,000 sound bites from Enes Kanter than have to feel like I need to gouge my eyes out because I keep watching Elfrid Payton. It is not even a competition.
Yeah, before a single possession wasted where Elfrid Payton is not passing to a wide open RJ Barrett. Yeah.
Okay. They're not signing Enes Kanter or Elfrid Payton. Yeah, but I like the way everything's set up. Okay.
One just quick before we segue.
Yes.
I do want to say as well, just kind of going back to the idea of if the Knicks entered next season without cap space, talking about, what you mentioned with Marcus Morris and that whole team, it brought to mind the fact that when the Knicks thought they were getting Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and that whole thing, what happened when they didn't get it? They were left holding the bag and scrambling. Yeah. And then they said, you know what? Who cares about fit? Let's just get the best players that we can get and lump them together and see how it works. Yep. And the spacing was the worst in the NBA, and it's one of the worst I've ever seen. And instead, the Knicks didn't do that. They said, you know what? We're going to actually form a team based on what we want to accentuate and what we want to hide in terms of the areas of development and weaknesses. So in that sense, it's like, think back to next year. Again, if it's like Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart and you're scrambling to get the best players on the market and you're trying to also figure out who fits, and before you know it, someone else is flying off the board, and okay, do you have to, make a big trade and overpay for someone because of the fact that you were banking on something? It's just nothing is prepared about it. It feels like it's a wing and a prayer. Well, and that's what cost Steve Mills his job. And there's a reason why, because it was not the best plan. The backup plans were, again, just like, this is talent. Does it fit? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, and by the way, the talent was clearly good because Randall this year, Marcus Morris generally over the last few years, Bobby Portis in his right role is like Reggie Bullock, Wayne Ellington. It's like it was too much. It was clunky. We don't have to talk about it anymore. Last thing, very last thing on this before we talk about the league. I think it also shouldn't go without at least recognition. They wanted to get certainty. Like they didn't let things linger to the point that they would be left then scrambling with imperfect options or putting together an imperfect team, because that's the other danger about having all this cap space and all of these open spots is yes, sure, there's an upside there to you could craft things as you want, but if shit starts flying off the board and then you're suddenly left scrambling, and I don't want that to be mistaken for let's sign Timofey Mozgov for 4 years and $64 million at midnight. That's not, again, the valuation of these contracts is very different from some of the minute one signings that we have seen in free agency in years past. That was not what these were. They were solid, not spectacular, solid. Okay. Let's go here. Is there one thing some other team did that the Knicks did not do that you are jealous of or you really wanted them to do?
Yeah, actually, there's one move that I would have liked the Knicks to have done instead.
Can I guess what it is?
Sure, go right ahead.
I think you wanted. Oh wait, no. Sorry, I thought I was looking at Kelly Olynyk. No, you didn't want Kelly Olynyk. No, I don't think you're a Rashawn Holmes guy. I know it's not Duncan Robinson. Man,
want me to tell you?
Devontae Graham? No,
it's not Devontae Graham.
Who?
So we're talking about how Nerlens Noel got a 3-year deal, $32 million, really 2 years and 21 or so. Yeah. Let's say that deal is 2 years. Okay. I mean, I would have appreciated the Knicks taking on Derek Favors and that first round pick.
Wow.
See, again, I understand that Derek Favors doesn't necessarily fit what the Knicks are looking for. Offensively, he does.
Listen, he's a good
Defensively,
center.
he doesn't.
Come on, he's a good player.
Of course, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and it's like, you're you're taking on a salary dump and you're getting a future first round pick for it. You could use that pick for more ammo.
And that's the continuity part of it. They wanted the continuity, clearly.
But that's my thing. Yeah. They clearly have continuity with Taj, Burks, Rose, and every other young player that's coming
Favors
back.
Is awesome.
Right. Like, so you're getting an awesome piece and you're getting a first round pick.
And he seems like a great guy. Like that, to me, that strikes me as a guy who would have fit in well in like a lot. I mean, who knows, but
Right. What gets sent out though? What would they trade?
The Knicks?
Yeah.
I mean, the Jazz were cutting salary, so they could send a second round pick if they wanted to.
Oh, so it'd be one of the.
They could send Vildoza and they
into their cap space. Yeah.
Right. It's absorbing it.
And that trade that was made on draft night, though, right?
I believe it was. And the Knicks had the space for that too. That's
but it was made on draft night for the 30th pick in the draft, right?
No, it was a
future first. Oh, okay. All right.
That I believe it was. I mean, Andrew, if you want to double check while we're doing that,
whether it was or it wasn't, that to me just speaks to the reality of like, look, what the Knicks did may not have been Leon Rose's plan A. He may have had other designs on the cap space, which we could sit here and acknowledge that. What those designs were, I can't tell you. My suspicion, and this is the way that I'm going to turn. No one's going to want to hear this. I don't really give a shit. I'm not going to say Duncan Robinson because that's too easy. The honest answer is I think Spencer Dinwiddie, it's not official yet, obviously, that he signed, but the reports are that he's going to sign in Washington for 3 years, and I believe $60 million is the number that's been tossed around, if I recall. I just am a really big fan of Spencer Dinwiddie. I think he's a really good player. I think the shooting, his lack of shooting is much overblown. And I think, look, let's be honest. There's already been talk about how Beal likes his game. He likes Beal's game. There's maybe a synergy there. I don't get the sense that the Knicks, for some reason, Dame is clearly where it's at in terms of the here and now. And maybe there's some other stuff that's where it's going to be at within a couple of years, whether that's a Zion or a Donovan Mitchell or whoever. For the right now, if you're looking at, okay, what's the trade that's going to happen in the next 6 months? It's Dame. It's not Beal. I don't feel like I've ever seen any Beal buzz real. Like I was like, oh, that's legit in terms of the Knicks. All that being said, I just like Spencer Dinwiddie. I think it's a fair contract. I think 3 years, $20 million, a good deal. For them to have been able to sign this, it would have just been Dinwiddie instead of, I guess, Burks, right? Because then they would have had the space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that more than Ball, because again, I could see Ball going poorly here. I don't know. I think Dinwiddie would have been good for this team. I know they were in on him. I'm sure that's been reported elsewhere. Although I believe Bondi tweeted today that they never made a formal offer. I think the reason they never made a formal offer is because they couldn't. There had to be some kind of a disagreement on something in terms of guaranteed years or whatever. But I would have liked Spencer Dinwiddie.
It is a first round pick, by the way, for Derek Favors.
Right? Is it future first?
A future first. Yeah.
So I would have liked that. I think the one thing with Dinwiddie is I can't blame the Knicks for not committing, if it's, let's say it's 3 years that was guaranteed to a guy who's had two ACLs. That's, there's a reason why I think they were a little bit more trepidatious on it. It's because they're concerned about what the wear and tear looks like for someone. I know you're saying the shooting is overblown. But I think it's still a reason for concern as well. But no, he's a better passer than he gets credit for. I think you can switch better with him because of his size. I think it's okay that they passed it up. I'm not quite as heartbroken, or not, I don't mean that in a rude way.
No.
It's not quite eating at me like it seems to be eating at you.
No, it's not. Listen, it's not eating at me. And all things considered, I think if you said to me, I think Spencer Dinwiddie's, but then again, he may still need to have his injury managed. I was going to say Spencer Dinwiddie's probably going to play more minutes than Derrick Rose. But like the Derrick Rose that I saw last year is probably every bit as good as the version of Spencer Dinwiddie that we're going to get next year. So it's like, that's the other thing about the Rose signing. It's like Rose exists in this weird place in the mental makeup of NBA fans where the recollection of the guy who was literally out of the league that nobody fucking wanted, who was waived, is not that far away. But he's also aside from the former MVP, he's also the guy that came to the Knicks and was 28-7 on the team, and then he was the best player in the playoff series. So like that's a real thing that happened. And he's only 32 years old. So, I don't know. Okay. Next, should we hit on some other teams?
Yeah, let's look around the league.
Okay, so we got to start here. So the Bulls today. Look, let me just say, if the Knicks did this, I would have talked myself into it. If the Knicks did, and again, it's not apples to apples because the Knicks didn't trade 2 first-round picks and a promising young center for Nikola Vucevic. They didn't, so they're not out a pick already. But like, if they, for argument's sake, gave $85 million to Lonzo Ball and then gave 3 years, $87 million guaranteed to DeMar DeRozan, I would have been like, all right, you know what? Giddy up. Let's see what this basketball team can do. I'm curious to see what those 2 guys plus RJ plus Randall plus the kids and the whole thing. I'm curious to see what they could have done. At the same time, in the back of my mind, I'd be like, holy shit, this might end in disaster. And I would immediately be thinking to myself, man, I hope Portland likes Lonzo Ball, because if they don't, we're kind of fucked, because this team isn't going anywhere significantly better than a better place than it is right now. The Bulls are in that spot, albeit with Zach LaVine. We do not have a Zach LaVine. And I know you're going to tell me, well, Julius Randle made the 2nd team All-NBA. Zach LaVine didn't make any. Listen, Zach LaVine's obscenely good. His efficiency is off the charts. He could do things that just there aren't many guys in the league that could do. They have him. We do not. So that's different. They're also now out. They could trade they have 1 first-round pick left that they could trade in 2027, right?
2028, I think.
2020. Christ. So they're at a significant pick deficit. Are they completely boxed into a corner? Not really. Patrick Williams could pop. Kobe White, I guess, theoretically could still pop. I don't know what that's going to look like, but this is their team now. So Jeremy, I know you have some thoughts on this.
I mean, I would not have rationalized it. I would have been like, you would have been like, we are so fucked. I mean, you're right. If the Knicks had done this, it would have felt like, oh my God,
it'd be better.
This is
a better basketball team.
Sure, that's nice, but I don't want better. I want to build to greatness, and this to me feels like a very high floor team. And when I say very high floor team, I mean like first round, maybe second round.
You catch an injury break,
Sure, anything's possible. But again, it's like it's going all in on this team, and I would have been dumbfounded. I would have been pretty crushed. I would have been really upset. Also, the fact is that they signed and traded for DeMar DeRozan. They signed and traded for Lonzo Ball, and they have nothing in the the powder keg. It's empty. It's completely dry. So in terms of first round picks, and I just feel like last off season during the lull of the pandemic, when the Bulls were looking for new front office, it seemed like every single media member was saying, oh my God, Karnisovas, he's from Denver. Denver's great. This is going to be perfect. He's wonderful. The connections, this is fantastic. We love this. It's great. And now it's just like, what the fuck did he just do? He boxed this team into a corner to the point where how are they supposed to make moves, right? Okay.
Well, LaVine, how old's LaVine? 25?
I think he's 26. Yeah.
Okay, he's 26.
26.
If LaVine, I don't know what percent, is there a 10% chance he elevates himself to a legitimate top 10 NBA player? Is there a 10% chance of that?
I mean, I think that might be a little generous, and I know 10% isn't a lot, but what are the odds that LaVine even leaves?
But you mean stays?
Oh, really? No, I'm saying.
Oh, well, no. What are the odds he leaves?
What happens if Zach LaVine looks around and is like, okay, so let me get this straight. I'm playing with Vucevic, who is an all-star, but can't defend the pick and roll to save his life.
Oh, this team can't defend anybody.
DeMar DeRozan, who drove 18 times a game last year, and I do like the ball in my hands, and he doesn't like an outside shot unless it's in the mid-range, so we have to worry about spacing the floor a bit, and we can't provide a point of attack defense. I've got Lonzo Ball, who again can function well, but he's going to be an off-ball wing, which means he's spotting up quite a bit. He takes on a lot of the tougher assignments, and he's good at it, but, that's still tough. I've got Patrick Williams, who's supposed to be more of a, I don't want to say project, but he's coming along a bit more slowly than some of the other players. I think he can be a really good asset, but in that window, I don't see it. I've got Alex Caruso, who is...
I like Alex Caruso.
He's good. He's a pesky player. It brings defensive intensity. I do like him, but like Caruso isn't what's going to keep me necessarily there. And it's looking at this team, and it's like, it's seeing the windows and how they overlap, and the avenues that are basically closed off, where if you want to make a trade for some big name, you have to use Patrick Williams and one Ball. Of the other guys. It's Ball. Like Patrick Williams and Ball. Right. And how many teams are going to really be that interested in that? It's a lot to put in for what's going on.
I like Williams. Can I just say, it just hit me. You want to talk about the team that should have offered Sir Duncan Robinson a 3-year max contract? Because I'm pretty sure a 3-year max to Duncan Robinson is the exact same amount of money that they just gave to DeRozan, right? Because a first-year max for a 0 to 6-year player in the current cap is like, what, 27, 28 million?
Yeah, around that.
Okay, so maybe it's a couple bucks more than DeRozan. The formula in the NBA, with the rules they are now, is quite simple. You got your action, but you're between two guys, and then outside of that action, you got shooters. That's it. It's very simple. Zach LaVine is going to be one of the guys in that action, probably with Vucevic, who's a very good offensive center. You got a blueprint there, right? Adding Ball made a lot of sense. DeRozan just I'm sure they'll figure it out to a certain extent, but in the playoffs, I don't know how that's going to go.
Yeah. I was just reacting to, speaking of shooters, and I named him on the podcast. Hassan Whiteside just signed with the Jazz. So, and I say shooters, obviously, facetiously. But hey, I guess he is the Derek Favors replacement. So yeah.
That's a surprising.
It's got to be depth. That's pretty much what it is. So.
By the way, how about Andre Drummond backing up Joel Embiid? That's the funniest moment of the day, brother. Easily. Yeah. Okay, so we didn't love the. We should have also mentioned in our point guard discussion before, George Hill, who was waived very late last night, got picked up by the Bucks. He's back in Milwaukee. I wouldn't have minded George Hill for the remaining cap space for 1 year.
I would have.
You don't like George Hill? Again,
it's not the 1 year's worth of salary. It has to be multiple years, because then you keep it on the books for longer. But with George Hill, I'm not giving him $8 million from the Knicks, and he's also not a starting point guard. He's the type of guy where, he's more of an off-ball guard who shoots nicely, but he's not going to drive. He's not going to dribble much to the rim. He's not going to penetrate quite a whole lot. I don't think the Knicks see I think he's 34, 35, something in that ballpark.
He's not young.
Right.
Probably 34.
So he doesn't fit. That's not necessarily what the Knicks want. So,
yeah, no, it's not.
Should we move on to the one big team?
Yeah, let's finish. About? Let's finish up with. I think we'll do a producer's corner after this, but let's do the Lakers real quick. So, all I want to say is this: you could talk about the Lakers' other moves, which, whatever. I'm sure that there are fans listening to this today who are disappointed that Carmelo Anthony will not be coming home, as it were. Look, Carmelo. Let me say this. Putting the basketball part of it aside, and I'll again reference what I said before about I like everything is in order here, and there's not it's pretty clear what the roles are going to be, and there's not going to be any chicanery there. The notion of making good with Melo, I think had value. This was the organization he gave 7 years in the prime of his career to. It ended on acrimonious terms. I think there is something to anybody who's ever said, like, people around the league notice that shit. I know it's a different regime here. I know Dolan and him apparently got along swimmingly, but I think there would have been some merit to him coming back to this team and finishing things where he started. That aside, I'm sorry. This team has needs. I'm not saying Melo's done as a player. I'm not saying any of that. I just, from a basketball standpoint, that's not where the Knicks are at right now. I just want to say that first. That's all.
I agree.
And I will turn it over to you to speak about other things on the Lakers.
Well, yeah, I mean, just with Melo, there's not really a spot. The only thing I could think of is basically you're saying, okay, Knicks shouldn't sign Burks. Let's give Melo a minimum deal. Let's convert the money to Spencer Dinwiddie instead. And I just don't think that's a solid plan. Melo shouldn't be chasing guys around the perimeter. He should be a 4. If you're committed to Julius Randle and Obi Toppin, then Melo's going to need time. Does that mean you're trading Obi Toppin to give Melo more time? Because we know that the Knicks aren't going to play Obi and Randle that much together, barring injury. So, anyways, there's a lot going on, but a lot of
he's happy now. He's happy.
Let him ring chase. He deserves it. Go for it.
Yes, Melo deserves his ring. There, yes. I said
it. So a lot of people have reached out to me asking about how the Lakers are doing this, and the reason I want to bring it up is, we can turn this into a general NBA discussion, but also because there's a good chance that in a few years this will actually be where the Knicks are at.
We hope.
So it's the sort of thing where, and I'll say it again in a few years, but it started like this, right? The Lakers traded out these pieces for Russell Westbrook. The math behind it works. They got Montrezl Harrell to opt into the contract that he had, and then they shipped him, Caldwell Pope, and Kuzma to Washington. And then in return, they're getting Russell Westbrook.
In a trade that has not been completed yet, it can't be completed for another 3 days. And there is a possibility that the trade still expands to include other teams, but I digress.
Correct. So it could get bigger. So let's say that's everything that goes down. In the meantime, the Lakers have a few things at their disposal. Number one, minimum contracts, right? So what Melo signed, a minimum contract. Malik Monk signed a minimum contract. Anyone you could pretty much think of that's not named Kendrick Nunn signed a minimum contract. Kendrick Nunn, he signed the taxpayer mid-level exception. That's the only thing that the Lakers could really have at their disposal, because if they did the mid-level exception, then they would be hard capped, which basically means that they've spent too much money, and they would be spending more than that, which is not allowed. You can't go over the hard cap at any point this season. So they had to just use the tax mid-level exception, which is like $6 million, give or take, which is what Kendrick Nunn got, and he got a player option the second year. Or I guess it was 5, or it's 6, but he got 5. Whatever, they're splitting it up in some way. The third thing in this case, or fourth thing, is Talen Horton-Tucker got an extension. So because the fact that the Lakers aren't hard capping themselves, similar to like with the Nets, where the Nets can just hand out money based on extensions, exceptions, or minimum contracts, that's what they did. So they agreed to, I think it was like 3 years and $33 million, something like that.
And just for anybody, you reference hard capping a couple times. There are certain things that you could do in the NBA with different manipulations of the salary cap that trigger something called the hard cap. The hard cap is at 140. Was it 142, 143, something around there?
Yes, it's basically there's the luxury tax, and then a little bit more above that is the tax apron. Cap. That's where the hard cap is. It's right at the tax apron. So
you can blow way past that. Like I think last season the Sixers, maybe the Warriors, maybe both of them, I don't know, had salaries that were way above that because they did not do anything to hard cap themselves. So the Lakers, as I understand it, is what you're saying, have not hard capped themselves, correct?
There are like 3 ways for them to hard cap themselves. The first is a sign-in trade if the player or players that they are acquiring were free agents. If they're under contract right now, which Russell Westbrook is, and that's a different story. But even with Schroeder, right? Let's say the Knicks sent Knox to the Lakers, and like that wouldn't be hard capping them, even though they're sending out Schroeder.
But not Reggie Bullock, which is why when people were talking about sign-in trades involving Reggie Bullock for Schroeder, the Lakers would not have been able to do that because they would hard cap themselves.
Right. The second is using the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is $10 million. Anything that's in between what the taxpayer would be, which is around 6, to what the non-taxpayer is, which is around 10. Anything in that range, that hard caps you. Then there's also the biannual exception that is
I forgot about that.
a few $1 million. That also hard caps you. The Lakers haven't done any of that. So they're still able to do all these pieces. Same thing with the Nets, right? I think a big reason with Spencer Dinwiddie is if they sign and trade him, which Washington has to do because they don't have salary or they don't have cap space. The Nets are not going to hard cap themselves. They're not going to do the biannual. They're not going to do mid-level because it'll be the tax mid-level. They're not going to do the non-taxpayer. They're going to do the taxpayer mid-level. And they're not going to do, anything that would clip them in terms of what they could do. So moving forward, this is also why it's so important for the Knicks to keep adding salary. Yes. Because down the line, there will come a time where maybe they next year, right? Next year, the Knicks will likely have the non-taxpayer mid-level exception at their disposal because they will be over the cap. They won't have dipped down, which means that they don't have to worry about the room exception. They get the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. And then moving forward, it'll be taxpayer mid-level and doing what the Lakers do. Again, we hope. But it's
a good problem to have.
That's basically how it works.
Yeah. And give the Lakers credit, for as much as we could sit here and make fun of the Russell Westbrook trade and how that's going to fit or how it's not going to fit, as it were. They know what they're doing with the cap, as most teams do. To bring it back to the Knicks, again, we're a long way away from where the Lakers are, where the Nets are. The Nets are obviously, they are also getting players left and right, it seems, Patty Mills and what have you. Teams set themselves up for summers like this where they can do, but then you see some other teams that didn't set themselves up as well. And then they, it's more of a struggle for them to manipulate the cap in this way. The Knicks seem to know what they're doing on that end, which again, you may not like the signings that they made. You may think they should have gone a different direction. There is more logic to this stuff than just the players, that they brought in, although that is obviously, the largest part of it. Okay. I think we've done this post-mortem justice. Anything else on your mind, Jeremy?
I'm still curious about how this point guard position will shake out and the leftover money, but that's who knows? I mean, in the time it takes between this dropping or us recording this and it dropping, maybe it's figured out. But the Knicks have a little bit of time where they can also do it. I mean, the money that Rose is getting, it's not going away. The question is the market and how that works.
I do want to say, just to piggyback on something that you said earlier, the notion that it is important for the Knicks to go into next summer as an over-the-cap team, which I completely agree with you. I wonder how much of who they sign, because I'm guessing they're at this point probably going to want to sign a 1+1 where they have the team option, right? Does that make sense?
That, or it could be, a player like Schroeder or Reggie Jackson's getting 2 years guaranteed and the third year is non-guaranteed. Something.
So I wonder that, again, you referenced it before, how much of this is Dennis Schroeder doesn't want to lock himself into 2 years. Dennis Schroeder sees the exact same impending free agent market as you do next summer with the likes of Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart headlining that class and be like, fuck this. I don't want to next summer. I'm not going to have to compete with the Kyle Lowrys and the Spencer Dinwiddies and the Lonzo Balls of the world. I'm going to be at the top of the heap. So I would imagine that is as big a reason as any why he has not signed yet. So I wonder if this is basically going to come down to them finding a player who is willing to take himself off the market for 2 years. And I wonder who that player is. I don't know.
But it's not just taking themselves off the market. It's taking themselves off the market and he feels like he's getting a strong deal, but the Knicks also feel like you can trade that player. I mean, again, I think the reflection of Dennis Schroeder is that clearly not a lot of teams were jumping to sign Schroeder for something. Jake L. Fisher talked about it, and there's a reason. When he said that the Knicks seemed to be the only team prepared to give him an offer, I guess there's a reason why. His market just isn't there. So if you're the Knicks, if you're locking into Schroeder on a 3-year deal where the first 2 years are guaranteed and you're giving him in excess of $15 million, how many teams are going to want to pay Dennis Schroeder a guaranteed $15-16 million next year, 2022-23. So that's what you have to figure out if you're Brock Aller and Leon Rose. How tradable is this player going to be? And I think that you could honestly say that Nerlens Noel is easier to trade than Dennis Schroeder. I mean, granted, Dennis Schroeder was traded for Danny Green. It's not like Dennis Schroeder has not been traded before. He was also traded from Atlanta. So clearly his contract gets passed around. But how valuable is it going to be at that point? I don't know.
Jeremy, there's only one name. It's Frank Ntilikina.
Yes.
Clearly where this is heading.
Hey, listen, I'll put this out there. For the room exception, I would understand it. Like, just based on the who's left and wanting to use the room exception and adding more salary to your disposal, I get it, right? It makes sense to me. You get a team option on the second year for Frank. If it doesn't work out this year, all right, that's fine. If it does work out, that's also great. And guess what? It's still salary that can be outgoing in a trade. So I have zero problem whatsoever, because who else is there really to use on the room exception? Because how many guys are really going to get significant minutes?
Raul Neto, anyone? I don't know. Anyway, okay.
Pass on Raul.
Andrew, before we get out of here, anything from you?
Yeah. So 2 producer notes. First, I just want to comment on 2 things I heard from tonight. And just the thing about Spencer Dinwiddie, if you're thinking about it from a Bradley Beal perspective, I have enough confidence, because you mentioned, Jeremy, as I was rewatching our marathon stream, your whole thing about like tampering's a thing. Like, these guys are talking. If Spencer Dinwiddie was going to be the recruiting chip for the Knicks, he would be a New York Knick right now. I think it says a lot that he isn't, that they've read the tea leaves. The scuttlebutt that we don't get to see has said Bradley Beal's probably not leaving Washington, which even more indicates that he's not leaving Washington, that the team that Dinwiddie did go to was Washington. So,
and if Beal doesn't leave Washington, take a look at the Celtics, because the Celtics are purposely trying to create cap space for next year. And if the Celtics are unable to land Beal, we can look at them and be like, hey, you know what? That could have been the Knicks.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, and they're like, well, we've just wasted another year of the 2 J's. And I mean, that's pretty tough to sell to them, to the fan base, all of it. So I kind of hope at this point that Bradley Beal stays, because I just don't see him as a Knicks target. And I don't want the Celtics to get him either. So
that's the
keep them in mind.
Yeah, that's the team. Okay.
Only I'll say about Chicago is I think it's 2 completely different situations, completely different players that they acquired. I just remember also hating everything Atlanta did last year. And then Trey took a leap, and that team fit perfectly around him. And again, I personally don't see how this fits the same way that it fell into line for Atlanta, but maybe, Levine with better players around him can also take same leap like Trey did. Is the only comp I could make. At the same time, if we're here to make jokes at the expense of the Chicago Bulls, I'm all for it.
Well, but just to your point, the East got a lot better.
Yeah.
Let's just acknowledge that. The East got a lot better. And I was going back and forth with Yaron Weitzman about this on Twitter today, and he's not wrong. What the Knicks did, for anybody who's like, oh, they had a great offseason, or they had a decent offseason, so that means they're going to be there's a real possibility the Knicks are the 7th, 8th, 9th. I mean, I could probably go further down. I'm not going to. Best team record-wise in the conference. And guess what? They might be a better team. And now's not the time to do it and go through their schedule and point to all of the instances where, I'm going to say it, they maybe got a little lucky with injuries or, whatever else. But they weren't that many games ahead of whatever it was, 7th last year.
They're 2 losses away from being the 6th seed.
Yeah.
Literally, they're a game ahead of Miami and Atlanta.
And won because Miami had the tiebreaker.
That's right. Yeah.
So, let's put it this way. Going into the last weekend of last season, there was a possibility that they could fall to 7th. So yes. that much I remember.
Yes. Boston self-combusted. And then,
So you look at, Atlanta a whole season with this roster, probably healthy, this coach, the whole thing, Chicago, what they've done, Miami, what they've done. And who knows what, So yeah, it's going to be a tough go with things.
Yeah. And then I'll just thank you to literally everybody that wished me a happy birthday today. I've done this for both of your birthdays, and I made a joke about it on Twitter today that there's obviously a famous person that has my birthday and we're not wishing that person a happy birthday, but I figure I'll be the bigger person and wish Martha Stewart a very happy it's her 80th birthday. She's like
80?
She's the GOAT of entertainment television.
She's good for 80.
Well, honestly, the former GOAT became the president and we can't acknowledge him anymore. But Martha Stewart, happy. Was that not who you thought I was? Was it like a sports related person?
No idea who you're talking about.
Nate McMillan, happy birthday. It's his 50, the coach that turned the Hawks around. You guys give me this weird look like there's somebody I'm missing. Is it an athlete?
We don't have to say.
Oh, Troy Gloss, the former baseball player.
All these people have your birthday.
Yeah, Troy Gloss is 45 years old. It's Mark Reynolds' birthday. Fine, I'll go to the football one. Todd Gurley is 27 years old today. Happy birthday. He's the GOAT one of the GOATs at his position. Has had some of the best individual seasons.
I got Todd Gurley as a rookie in a fantasy dynasty auction, and I was very happy with that investment.
Yes. I'm sorry if you were expecting somebody else. I didn't mean to leave you deflated.
No, it's fine.
Jeremy got that.
I did. That was good.
And just last thing again, thank you everybody for all the birthday wishes. And for those that I promised the live stream would be available on the podcast feed, talk to YouTube. A little behind the scenes. When all of these live streams get done, when John's done doing a reaction to the game, I am given a file that once it's available to download, I do so and then take the audio and put it on the feed. Well, those streams are usually 45 minutes to an hour. We did more than that. So it could take a couple days for that to become available. As soon as it is, we will get it up there. And last night was really special. And, you know, this place where we get to do our thing is really special. So thank you. And, go Knicks.
Really well said.
Thank you.
I hope everybody has enjoyed the last 24 hours, even if you didn't necessarily love the signings. But hopefully you come around on them too. We are going to have at least one more episode for the rest of this week.
Yeah.
Probably just one more, but you never know because we're always up to some kooky shit. But we have some good things lined up in the weeks ahead, and that's that. We hope everybody's well, and we'll talk to you soon. Adios.